No intro, straight onto the guide. The key fundamental behind Gibraltar is to maintain high grounds, more specifically being blue box, airship, and bridges on each point respectively. This applies to almost every comp, and if we take blue box as an example and apply the 4 general positional rules of cover, LOS, distance from angles, and rotational options, we do have all 4. With dive on attack more specifically, high ground gives your team the ability to stage dives and to deny the enemy team from having any angles, as Spilo explains here.
Now, Midget did a pretty darn good video on dive on this map recently. And he talks a lot about controlling high ground, controlling angles and things like that, because it gives you safety and allows you to engage on the enemy team. In other words, even when you're not playing dive, if this team just pushes cart up through here and your Sigma's on main, but your Doom is on high ground and you're on high ground and your McCree is on high ground, they're going to die. They're going to die. It doesn't matter how far they push cart, they're going to die. They have to push up and control high ground. And so either you punish them for not doing that by being high ground yourself, or if they try and push high ground, you're already positioned here to stop them. This is the part of the map that matters. We don't care about this part of the map.
In terms of pushing cart whilst your team fights for high ground, you should send a mobile hero such as a Tracer, Genji, Echo, or D.Va to push cart whilst the rest of your team rotates and fights on high ground. This is because these mobile heroes should be able to leave cart at any time to either contribute to the high ground skirmish or to escape if the enemy team decide to rush whoever's on cart, which is why you'll almost never want to send a hero like Ana, Zen, or Brig to solo push cart. As a summary, here's Spilo quickly going over the things mentioned prior.
You get control of high ground, you rotate from your supports from here to here, then you rotate your supports from here to here, and then you try and rotate your supports from here to here if possible. It's just like incremental development, one after the other after the other. Eventually, oftentimes the enemy supports end up on the back high ground, but if you get to here, you can actually dive them. The only problem is that cart becomes a problem. So you don't need a lot of people pushing cart, but you want somebody pushing cart. And that's where it starts to become an issue, because you can win high ground, but then the cart's like all the way back here again. So generally, sometimes you'll have, like, if you're playing D.Va will push cart because she can fly up to high ground whenever she wants to. Tracer, because Tracer can push cart and then blink through here and then, contribute to the dive over here. So yeah.
With dive on defense, it's the same old deal with high ground, but more specifically, high ground on defense allows you to utilize kill boxes. A kill box is simply an area of the map which you attack once the enemy team pass through it. Typically, kill boxes are an open space and most members of your team should have line of sight onto it. Some notable examples would be on the first corner or when the cart exits the tunnel. With poke on attack, the story doesn't change too much compared to dive. You'll still be fighting for high ground, but just with longer sightlines. Maybe you'll have a pocketed DPS on coast, or you'll have some DPS on the high ground closest to the attacker spawn, etc. In terms of who's going to push cart, if your team doesn't have a mobile hero, which by the way should be Tracer, watch my double shield guide to find out why, Orisa should be the one pushing cart due to our high self-sustain and range poke. With poke and defense, the same old deal applies. Multiple angles on high ground, with preferably long sightlines, hence you might see the back high ground get some more use. Do keep in mind that when playing poke against dive, try not to play too split or isolated, as you won't receive any help from your team. With Brawl and attack, there's essentially 2 options you have, either clearing high ground or tunneling/turtling. With the first option, clearing high ground is as simple as it sounds. You path the high ground and try and fight in short sightline in close spaces as shown here. One small thing to add for backline heroes such as Baptiste or McCree, especially against dive comps, would be to try and always have a defensive rotational option available, for instance, kiting off high ground. With the second option, tunneling or turtling are essentially the complete opposite. Both tunneling and turtling is when you play in enclosed spaces underneath the high ground to force objective pressure. The difference between tunneling or turtling is that you're often stuck in the same place when you're turtled, but when you're tunneling, you're moving and rotating underneath the high ground instead of being in one place. Tunneling will likely be your option, whereas on defense, you'll be more inclined to turtle. Here's Temporal showing an example of tunneling underneath the high ground, which allows you to pull off some tricks with the Brawl comp.
You let the payload get to like here-ish, a little shallower than it is with your team, because you as a team pushed it to here, and your Reinhardt or your D.Va can get like this deep themselves, no problem. Then what's going to happen is you're going to go through as a group, it might roll back slightly, and then we have some tricks that we can play. We can either we go out here and we try to catch the cart and drag the cart the rest of the way forward with like a tank. Like we go, hey, our Reinhardt goes and tries to drag it forward, or our D.Va tries to go and drag it forward. Or we rotate up here to try and clear people. Or we pretend that this is what we're doing, and we do this, but we let our D.Va go this way, and we let our D.Va try to hit a boosters through here, and she's going to finish down here, and if she knocks anyone down, we just get to eat them for lunch.
With Brawl and defense, due to the long and open sightlines that high ground has, you'll be more inclined to turtle underneath the high ground. Here's Lucid summarizing what turtling is and showing an example of it.
Rhine comps can't fight in an open space against spam comps, and fighting below high ground against dive puts Rhine Rush at a huge disadvantage. Turtling basically means that instead of trying to stand on or stall the objective in the open, you place your team in an enclosed area. preferably beneath, not directly under the high ground, where they are hard to kill. This is best illustrated by a few examples. Gibraltar is a bad map for Rhine comps because of the long sight lines and high grounds that both spam and dive teams can use. On defense, you can initially hold the high ground, but you will eventually have to drop the contest. But because you have no vertical mobility, it's hard to get back up to high ground once they have it. And by giving up the high ground, the enemy has free sightlines onto your supports and a great staging area to dive into the backline. If you insist on running Rhine on Gibraltar against a spam or dive team, you're basically forced to turtle. For example, on Gibraltar A defense, an underrated place to stall the cart is probably the mega beneath the high ground. They can hold high ground all they want, but if they want to push the cart, they have to fight you in the small underpass.
Moving on to second point attack, with a focus on dive. As soon as you cap, almost all teammates should rush immediately to airship, especially backline, with a mobile hero such as D.Va, Tracer or Echo left to push cart. Probably D.Va due to her vertical mobility, larger HP pool, and less poke threat compared to Echo. Now that your team is high ground, you can more easily stage a dive onto their backline. Make sure that it's well timed, i.e. your Winston doesn't dive in by himself, whilst your Echo is 50 meters behind pushing cart. Whilst your Winston dives in, your backline heroes such as McCree, Brig, Ana, Zarya or D.Va can more aggressively take space in airship. With dive on defense, the same applies. Your team fights for high ground control on top of airship to allow your team to dive from angles, whether that's a Winston dropping from airship or an Echo dashing out of airship to get an off angle onto backline. With poke on attack, nothing too much changes, and this is quite similar to first point attack, with heroes having slightly longer sightlines. This could be a Widow setting up on high ground closer to spawn, or an Ashe being on top of airship, etc. One additional thing I didn't mention was how powerful Sigma Brig or Sigma and another DPS are at flank control and winning duels. Sigma's the best duelist in the game and only falters at close range, which is where a hero like Brig, McCree or May come in, who have all got some form of close quarter combat threat. Previous advice on cart management, such as having a Tracer push cart, or if that's unavailable, having an Orisa push cart, still apply. With poke and defense, I'll take a slightly more different approach explaining how important airship is with the 4 positional rules mentioned at the start of the video. The first one is cover, simple enough. The second one is LOS, onto both teams. The third one is distance from angles, so that a flanker doesn't sneak up on you. And the final, most important rule is to have both aggressive and defensive rotational options in order to give you another angle of damage or to retreat safely. With Brawl and attack, again, it's either you clear high ground or tunnel underneath. With clearing high ground, there's really only one route as shown on the screen. Make sure that when your team are rotating in open space, you'll D.Va DMs and you rotate as 6. With tunneling underneath, here's Temporal going over a few examples.
Let's pretend that they've set up the oppressive defensive positions. They have an Ashe up here. Maybe they've set their Orisa up back here to do work. Maybe they've set up their soldier over here. How are you going to get this cart in if we pretend the cart is back here? Once you're here, you're sort of in like a, well, maybe we hug the left, but there's going to be a soldier right up there. So you're going to have to do some like D.Va contesting shenanigans, and there's going to be an Ashe up here. Like, it's pretty tough. You can try to sort of stabilize here. You can maybe stabilize in here. You can maybe go just duck under here to stabilize. This is probably your best stabilization spot because if they drop, you crush them again, but you got to be aware of places that you can go to stabilize and places you can call to go to stabilize here.
With Brawl and defense, since your team likes enclosed spaces, they can hold airship with relative ease. In terms of defending cart, that'll be D.Va or Rhine shop to contest cart. Otherwise, hold high ground for as long as you can to abuse your angled pressure. Moving on to third point attack, starting off with dive. Simply put, your tanks dive onto the bridge with a potential pincer from Tracer or Echo as shown. Just make sure that this is well timed and that all 6 members aren't just stacking on cart. With dive on defense, most of your backline heroes will be set up on bridge. In comparison, your Winston and or another teammate will be holding the adjacent high ground ready to drop on the enemy backline. Keep in mind that Winston isn't great on frontline. With poke on attack, again, nothing much changes compared to the other 2 points, with Sigma and the other DPS taking long sightline angles around the cart. With poke on defense, the same applies, utilizing the bridge. If you have a Tracer, you may want to send it to fend off the other Tracer or dive hero in either of the enclosed rooms. With Brawl and attack, you'll likely have to do both clearing high ground and tunneling in enclosed spaces, as some poll shows here.
Again, we do our little rotation across and we go, we're pushing cart a little from behind here after we've recharged resources, and then we go into here. And then we push back out to cart, push cart more, and then we go here. And then they don't know, are we coming out here to push cart more, or are we going upstairs to clear them as a group? Because again, if we go in here, they cannot come in here to fight us, right? So we want to remember that if we go inside, they simply won't come in to fight us.
With Brawl and defense, your Reinhardt holds the corner whilst your D.Va can fly up behind and have a 180-degree angle on the enemy team, although ensure to time this well for when either team engages. There's not too many great angles for Brawl to take, but especially if you're running Brawl without a Mei, Reinhardt should really be the only one on low ground contesting cart and the first corner. Well, that's the guide. Until next time.